Brendan Carr, Chairman, Federal Communications Commission. Chairman Carr, great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I've been such a big fan for many years for what you have built and the audience that you have built and the news and information you provide to so many Americans. It's a great public service, and so just thank you for everything you do day in and day out.
Well, thank you. You guys have been fabulous to work with, even when the Democrats were in control. Yourself and your staff and Commissioner Symington. I mean, whenever we went there with something, you guys were fabulous as you tried to navigate your way through Biden world. But you guys did a pretty good job because nothing really went down there bad. If you look at those 4 years, what could have happened didn't happen. There was some things we didn't like, but was nowhere near as bad as we thought it would be. So you and former Commissioner Symington did a super job. But I want to talk about what you just did a couple weeks ago, which a lot of conservative media was up in arms over it, which is your clear interpretation of the political equal time rule. And a lot of my colleagues in conservative media owners were very upset with that. Ann Fredericks and I are, as you know, Ann's our CEO. She runs the company. We put out a really deep-throated, full-throated endorsement of what you did because we think it's great for our business, great for all radio owners, great for TV owners. I think it's a great thing. And all you really ask for is during the political window, if you get one political candidate on or you promote one political candidate during the window, that the opposing candidate should have the equal time opportunity to do that. I happen to think that's a great idea, and it kind of got misinterpreted. You want to explain that? Because I think I'm 100% behind it.
Thanks so much for explaining that and for your support as well. You're exactly right. Fundamentally, what a lot of Americans are coming to sort of understand better these days is that broadcast, particularly broadcast television, is fundamentally different from a regulatory perspective than any other means of distributing news or information. And you talked about this in the intro, too, where you can have a streaming service, a podcast, a soapbox. There's lots of different ways to get news and information out. But broadcast TV is unique among all of those. Cable channels is different because in order to do that, you have to get a license from the government to broadcast on the airwaves. And what that necessarily means is the government is picking winners and losers, meaning if 5 people want a broadcast license in a community, the government just picks one of them. And that's different than cable channels, again, different in a lot of ways even than radio because there's much more available space on the radio side than on the TV side. And so instead of just simply standing in your own shoes like you would in a cable channel or a podcast, the law says that you are effectively a steward of the interests of the entire community that you're licensed to serve. And so you have to represent viewpoints that aren't necessarily going to be just the narrow viewpoints of yourself. And so one feature of that is called the equal time rule, which is to say if you put one political candidate on, then you have to afford an equal opportunity to a different one. And the idea there is that Congress didn't want a broadcast station to be able to really put their thumb on the scale for either one set of candidates or one candidate in particular. And over the last decade or so, the FCC had really walked away from enforcing equal time. In fact, there was a decision that the FCC issued in 2006 that involved one of the late night shows, The Tonight Show, Jay Leno, and Governor Schwarzenegger appearing. And the FCC there said that The Tonight Show was a bona fide news program. As you indicated, if you are a bona fide news program, then you're not subject to the equal time rule. But that Leno decision really sort of expanded the concept of bona fide news, which was about Meet the Press and Sunday shows, to apply, at least in some people's views, more broadly to all late night and variety shows. And what we simply reminded people of is that's not really the case, that each show has to stand on its own as to whether it's bona fide news or not. And if you're fake news, well, you are by definition not bona fide news.
Well, I mean, that's the whole thing to me. If you're, and this all stemmed from the 2024 election when, I guess it was Saturday Night Live, right? They had on Kamala Harris and President Trump didn't get equal time. Our view is when you're in the political window. I mean, we have candidates on our show all the time, and mainly on the Republican side, we have Democrats on every so often, but mainly on the Republican side. But my view is that if we have somebody on that's running for Congress or running for U.S. Senate or running for governor or attorney general, whatever that might be, and the Democrat then calls us or sends us an email and asks for equal time, we're happy to do that. That's good for the audience. That's good for the country. That's good for the listener. That's good for conversation. That's good for everything. How is that bad? How does that take away anything?
I think you're right. It's ultimately about more speech, not less. And look, it doesn't mean that the Democrat, has to go on your show or a Republican has to go on your show. It's just that they're, given the opportunity to do that if they wish. And so I think you're right. A lot of this does go back to Saturday Night Live when Vice President Harris and candidate Harris was snuck on the Saturday night before the Tuesday election. And actually the law was clear that Saturday Night Live was in fact not bona fide news. And NBC actually did have to offer equal time to President Trump, which they ended up doing. President Trump ended up getting free airtime, not on Saturday Night Live, but on a different NBC program. And actually so did a couple other candidates as well. So I think it's going to be a really good thing. It's what the statute is about. And again, if people don't like the special obligations that come with being a broadcaster, that's fine. They can turn their broadcast license. In fact, there's so many ways now to get news and information out there, cable channel, podcast, streaming, that it's not really an issue in my perspective. But if you want to be uniquely on that broadcast medium, then you've got to comply with the rules of the road for that.
Chairman Carr, why did you get so much pushback from conservative media on this?
Well, I thought the support was actually pretty decent across the board. There was some pushback. I think in particular people were worried about radio. But again, the decision that we issued last week was focused on precedents that were unique to the broadcast TV side. It was these Tonight Show precedents, the Today Show precedents that had been misinterpreted. And that was the focus of that public notice. The law hasn't changed at all with respect to the radio broadcasting side. And I think, almost all or many radio programs actually wouldn't have a problem qualifying under the bona fide news exception. But the concerns that have been raised is misreading of some of the FCC's broadcast TV side precedents.
Well, listen, our company endorsed your interpretation, and we welcome other voices in. And look, I mean, one of the issues that you've got here is a lot of people got mixed up, and I'm going to be very blunt. They got confused with the Obama Fairness Doctrine. And the Fairness Doctrine, which Ann and I tremendously opposed, was very different. What they were trying to do is say if you have a 3-hour host that's a conservative like John Fredericks, you have to give the next 3 hours to a left-wing host. Well, it would put us out of business. It would put the entire industry out of business in conservative talk because nobody would buy ads for that. Nobody tunes it in. So you just dry up. So that's very different than saying in the political window, you have on, pick a candidate. I have Ken Paxton on in a primary. Then I should have to allow equal time to Congressman Hunt and to Senator Cornyn if they so choose. And if Paxton, say, wins and I have him on, then whoever the Democrat nominee is after the primary should be afforded equal time as well. How is that a problem?
Well, you're right. I do think that part of the pushback was confusion between equal opportunities in the Fairness Doctrine. As you indicated, the Fairness Doctrine effectively said, when it was in effect, that you got to keep the ball at the 50-yard line on every issue that you discuss. So if you're going to discuss a controversial issue of public importance, you got to give the left perspective and the right perspective. So every single time you discuss something, you got to give equal airing to both sides of the issue. To your point, that's not at all what the equal time rule is. The equal time rule is you can say whatever you want about any issue, and you can sort of say it from any perspective you want. But if you have one political candidate on, you have to give equal airtime to the other political candidate. And I'm not necessarily advocating for bringing back the Fairness Doctrine. I do think, though, that if you have a public interest obligation, if you are singularly focused on only one very, very narrow perspective, and you're constantly broadcasting that, I do think that would be difficult to square with your broader public interest doctrine. So maybe not keep the ball at the 50-yard line all the time, but between the 40s, between the 30s, over some period of time, I think you're more likely to be satisfying your public interest obligation if you do that.
Listen, it's, one of the things that we need in this country is conversation and dialogue on both sides. And right now, a lot of us are not getting that because the country is so divided. So I'm also a supporter of that. If we happen to have an issue on, we have a firm belief on immigration, and I'm presenting that side of it. That's why we opened it up to callers. Somebody who wants to call in and present the other side. We're happy to have it, as we did earlier today, to have a good dialogue on that. You're on the John Fredericks Media Network, Trucking the Truth Across America. I'm with Federal Communications Chairman Brendan Carr. Chairman Carr, as you go forward in 26, lay out for our audience some of your top priorities for the FCC.
Well, thanks to President Trump, we're running a very aggressive agenda at the FCC. Most of what we're doing, we're putting under the umbrella of the Build America agenda, which is we're doing permitting reform. We're making it easier for broadband builders and construction crews to get dirt turning. We're also reinvigorating U.S. leadership in wireless. So whether it's your phone or a wireless connection to your house, you need these airwaves to make that happen. And during the Biden years, we fell way behind in terms of freeing that spectrum up. But President Trump came in and turned that around. We're pushing on national security, public safety issues. So we have a whole range, including the space economy. We're making sure that we can launch all of these new satellites into orbit to provide new high-speed services to the country. And we're seeing results. Prices for wireless plans are down already year over year. We're seeing increased competition. Prices for smartphones themselves are down. And so President Trump is really delivering some great results for the American people in the technology sector, and internet speeds are up pretty dramatically as well. So it's really good results so far, but not mission accomplished yet. We're going to keep running through the tape here.
Tell us about the effectiveness and speed getting broadband in some of America's rural communities. And we've talked about it a long time. It hasn't really gone as quickly as a lot of people in those communities would like. What is the FCC's vision there?
Well, you may remember during the Biden years, famously, Vice President Harris was put in charge of a $42 billion plan to connect millions of Americans to the internet. And after years, Vice President Harris running that plan, not a single American was connected. In fact, there wasn't even one shovel's worth of dirt that was turned. And President Trump came in and Secretary Lutnick came in, because this is where that program runs, which is out of the Commerce Department. And they've quickly reformed that program. And really soon here, you're going to see those dollars hitting the ground and shovels turning dirt, rural communities getting connected. But we also have lots of other options, too, because we've got all this spectrum now. People are getting new services directly from satellites, including Starlink. We're getting what's called fixed wireless services. We're soon going to be able to get services right to your smartphone from a satellite. So it's a really interesting time right now in terms of new competition for connectivity. So we're optimistic in where things are going. There's still some work to do, obviously, but we're going to get there. Coupling that with permitting reform, it's going to be some good wins here.
So here's a sticky question. I know that Commerce Secretary Lutnick is in favor of expanding the spectrum for satellite and utilizing that as a way to get broadband to people, in lieu of the majority of that being like fiber, right? Laying fiber. But one of the issues is, if people don't realize this, you go on a satellite now, you get 100 down and 20 up. 20 means the upload. That's about that's about all they can do. Fiber, of course, triples that. So the problem is, as the technology gets more advanced, you take another 5 years out. I mean, 100 down and 20 up is pretty good right now, but 5 years from today, that's not going to cut it for everything that's going on. But yet Lutnick is putting more emphasis on satellite than he is on fiber. How do you balance out what I just laid out?
I think Lutnick's right about this. I think the vast majority of connections are going to continue to be fiber, but when you get in that last single-digit percentage of the country, the cost to build fiber just starts to skyrocket. You can find communities where it costs, for instance, $100,000 to bring fiber to just a single home. And so trying to get the math to work on that is difficult. And 120 is great service right now. And by authorizing more satellites to launch and freeing up more spectrum, those speeds are just going to continue to increase. And so we think that there's a significant percentage, particularly landmass-wise, of the country where those satellite services are going to be great both today and into the future as well.
Okay, final thing, because I know you have to go. Newsmax and Chris Ruddy, a friend of mine, has been very critical of one of the FCC decisions coming down the pike as it relates to ownership within a market. Just walk our audience through that and why some of your detractors are mad at that.
This is an issue that's active before the FCC that we haven't made a final decision on, so we're taking views from all sides on it still. In a nutshell, there's rules on the FCC's books that have prevented broadcasters, the owners of broadcast stations, from amassing enough TV stations to exceed a certain percentage reach of viewers in the country. At the same time, those TV stations are increasingly competing against national programmers like Comcast and Disney. And originally, the idea was that by limiting the reach of broadcast stations, you would limit the power of Comcast and Disney. And one of the arguments we're seeing in the record is folks are saying that, in fact, the rule is doing the opposite, which is it's constraining the ability of competitors to Disney and to Comcast to compete against them. And so we're weighing all those issues. There's legal authority arguments that have raised in the record as well. And we're open-minded at this point still as to how to ultimately resolve it. But the North Star for me, regardless of which way we ultimately go here, is to make sure that we're constraining the power of Comcast and Disney, because I don't think it's good for the country to have them overpowering all of the local broadcast TV stations.
I agree with that. And you would be able to do that by taking some of the limitations off single ownership in a single market, correct?
That's the argument that one set of advocates in the proceeding have made, and we're looking at it.
All right. Chairman Carr, I want to thank you for your time today. As always, thank you guys for all you do. You've been fabulous to work with on our end as we've been able to build our company within your guidelines. So I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your staff. Your staff there is outstanding. Very
thanks to you. Thanks to you, Rhea.
All right, sir. Thank you. All right. Brendan Carr, you can follow him on Twitter at Brendan Carr. It's pretty easy, at Brendan Carr. Quick word from our sponsors. I'm going to be right back with your calls. 888-480-JOHN.